It's that time of the month when it's time for me to introduce you to another sweater pattern of mine that I've just released, the Thuraya Sweater. It's another experiment that I think turned out pretty cool, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. My name is Zanette. I am the designer behind Zaneteknits, and I've published over 100 patterns on Ravelry, and over the last 6 years I've tried to perfect the top-down seamless construction that results in a great fit. In this video I'll talk about the inspiration for this sweater, the yarn and gauge and needles that you need to use, the construction and all the techniques, a close up and how it all fits together, as well as some possible customizations. Test knitters had a great time making it, despite pretty much everyone saying that it was a little bit tricky to get started on the yoke, but after a few rounds and getting into the groove, it was smooth sailing and everybody found it easy to continue. And there were a couple, if not 3 people who either have already or are in the process of making 2 versions because they said it was so addictive. They also said it was the first time doing some of the techniques, so they learned a lot. And they appreciated that there was a way to make it very unique for them because a lot of these arrangements of the stitch patterns are customizable. If this kind of project sounds like something you'd be interested in trying, make sure you subscribe to my newsletter where I announce all test calls and pattern releases, and usually I strive to put something in there that's new and unique and interesting to make knitting fun and never boring. And my newsletter subscribers also get all sorts of discounts and other perks. This sweater was created in collaboration with Moondrake. I saw Rochelle in New York in Vogue Knitting Live, and we started discussing a collaboration. And at that time I was already in the zone to figure out various interesting ways to combine mohair and other yarn weights in a way that's different to the usual holding together. And I asked her if she'd be open for a project like that, and she agreed. And when I saw this colorway on Instagram, I immediately fell in love with it. It's just so mysterious and nuanced. And because Rochelle has this amazing color sense, it was her idea to pair it with the aubergine. So this one's called Timeless and this one's called Aubergine, and it's an amazing color combination, especially once you knit it up. And since I had just finished designing another mohair and normal yarn combination sweater with some interesting textures, the Kaeli sweater that launched last month, I wanted to keep the construction quite similar, except this time it's a lot more comfortable, it's a more oversized, and it has a slight drop shoulder feel to it. So the yarn this is DK weight and this is a lace weight mohair. But if you have an issue with mohair, some people do, they don't like how it feels to their skin, or they might be allergic or something. It doesn't need to be mohair. You could pick another lace weight. The most important part is that the interesting textures come from the 2 yarn weights being different. So predominantly it's DK, but the mix-in is with a lace weight. And if you pick a normal lace weight without the fluff, then of course your project is going to be a little bit more transparent. Here you can't really see because I'm wearing a t-shirt that's pretty much very similar to the triangles that get created with the mohair, but they are transparent. So if I was wearing a black tank top, you could see the outline of the tank top underneath here. So just bear in mind, if you're using a yarn that isn't fluffy, it would be even more see-through. And for that reason, I have called, in the pattern, I've called this to be the opaque yarn and this to be the sheer yarn. So this base from Moondrake is called a Drake, and this one is called Kinu Momo. And the gauge swatch, we only need to do one for the DK weight yarn, and we're gonna stick to the needle size that match the gauge, which is 18 stitches in 10 centimeters and 26 rows. also in 10 centimeters. Theoretically, you should match the gauge working flat. Some of the parts here are worked flat and in the round, but if you are like me and don't want to spend too much time swatching, you could just swatch the in the round, meaning most of the sweater is worked in the round. So if your in the round gauge matches, then that's great. And also it's not super crucial because of how comfortable and oversized it is. And you also probably don't need to worry about the row gauge too much, as long as the stitch gauge is in the ballpark. I had to use a 4mm, that is US size 6 needle, for the main body of the sweater, so all of the front, back, and the sleeves. And then for the finishing ribbing, we go down a few sizes. So I used 3.25mm, which is US size 3, the same for the cuffs and the hem. And a pro tip here is that your needles, the ones that you're doing this thorn stitch sections here, should have quite sharp tips, because with dull tips you are just inviting frustration into the project, and that's not what we want. So make sure your tips are quite sharp, because there are some lace techniques there. The pattern comes in 9 sizes. I am wearing a size 2 and it is quite oversized. Recommended ease is 25 to 30 centimeters. That is 10 to 12 inches around the chest. If you are quite busty, you can probably use the upper bust measurement and add the ease to that, because there will be plenty of room, but that way at least your shoulders won't be too far down, which might not be the look that you're going for. The smallest chest circumference of this finished sweater is 105 centimeters, which is 42 inches, and the largest it will go up to is 185 centimeters, which is 74 inches. So you can pick a sweater that fits, well, provided it's not a fitted sweater, and measure the chest circumference of that sweater, and then try and match the closest chest circumference in the finished measurement table. Or yeah, go by your full bust or upper bust measurement, add your desired ease, which could also be less than I recommend. I saw some test knitters with tighter sweaters and they still look really good. It is a top down and a seamless sweater, and it has a European shoulder. That's a fully fashioned shoulder, and in a moment I'll take you up close and show you how it all fits together. But I love that construction because it's easy to design and it takes care of the shoulder slope for a better fit without you having to do any short rows or complicated shaping. Probably the most interesting part about this construction is that as we do the top part, you can see here in the stockinette in the opaque yarn, flat on the back and then the fronts. And as soon as we finish that, as soon as we have here enough width of the sleeve cap, we join everything in the round, and that requires picking up some stitches here. You can also see that there's only 3 stitch patterns used really. There's the stockinette plain part, there's the 2-colored thorn stitch, and there are some garter ridges here in the sheer yarn. And the thorn stitch is a combination of some lace techniques, so yarn overs and decreases, as well as slip stitches. And they're all assembled in a very simple sequence. So we got the stockinette, the thorn stitch, the stockinette, the garter ridges, the stockinette, the thorn stitch, blah, blah, blah. You could get creative there and change it up as much as you want. That is probably after you complete the yoke, because there's quite a bit of shaping in the yoke part. But as soon as you separated the sleeves, anything goes. And because of that shaping in the yoke, I have listed this pattern in the advanced intermediate category, because you have to keep track of the shaping instructions in the yoke, as well as follow the very different charts. Well, they're simple charts, but in combination with what's going on in the shaping, and we're working on the back and front and the sleeves at the same time. So there's quite a bit to keep track of. And if you're not very comfortable making sweaters in this construction, then you might feel overwhelmed. But I have actually added at the back of the pattern a round by round tracker for each size that will tell you where the shaping increases are and which chart to follow. So if you just look at that, you should be good. But it's also a good idea to read the pattern a few times. Don't be discouraged if you don't get everything from the first time. A lot of the things will only start making sense when you start knitting and you can actually get a feel for the chart and how it works. So this sweater, we actually start at the back and we cast on just the stitches here for the neckline. And then we rapidly increase on both sides to the full width of the back. And at that point, we just put these stitches on hold as the next part will be working on the front shoulders. We start by picking up stitches along this edge here and working our way to match the length of the back that we've already done. At the same time, we're doing some increases here to shape the front neckline because it's a crew neck, so we need to slowly add stitches there. And we also reach the top of the sleeve cap width, so this whole length here will become the top of the sleeve cap. And we put these stitches on hold and go and repeat exactly the same on the second shoulder by picking up stitches and knitting to that length. This time we are increasing on the other side symmetrically to shape the front neckline. And as soon as we've done that, the next part is we continue, we knit across this front. We cast on the remaining stitches here that will complete the neckline, and we continue knitting across the other shoulder here. And next we pick up stitches for the left sleeve along this edge, and we transfer all the held back stitches and carry on to knitting across the back stitches to the other side, and then we pick up the stitches across the edge of the other shoulder for the right sleeve, and then we can join everything and work in the round. And it kind of becomes like working a raglan top down if you've done that before, where you do the front, back, and sleeves at the same time. But in a raglan, you have a shaping increases on all of the parts, so back, the front, the sleeves as well. Whereas in this construction, we can see that the back and the front do not need much shaping. We already have enough stitches for the full width. So for the actual yoke is split in 3 or 4 parts, sections, A, B, C, D. And each section is slightly different from the next section depending on where the increases are placed. So in the first section, section A, the increases are placed only in the sleeves. You will see that in the A section, as we work in the round, we increase the sleeve stitches and the sleeve becomes wider, whereas the back and the front stay the same. In section B, which is only for a few sizes, we just knit in the round and there are no increases at all. In section C, we continue to increase the sleeves, but we also start increasing in the body. So that's when it becomes like a raglan for real. And finally, for some sizes in section D, we have reached the required number of stitches for the sleeves, but we still need to shape the body and the armhole for the body. So there's only increases in the body. By itself, that wouldn't be so tricky because the pattern writes out all the increases, section A, just in sleeves, etc., etc. But the tricky bit comes from also introducing the charts. So the first chart is the thorn stitch chart, and then we have plain stockinette with some garter ridges, and then again the thorn stitch chart. And probably a lot of what I'm about to explain will only start making sense when you're knitting it, where you're trying to knit it. So if you're not there yet, you can probably skip to a lot further ahead. But if you're intrigued by this, then by all means, carry on watching. As I mentioned, the stitch count will change for sleeves initially and then also for the body. What that means is that there will not always be enough stitches to fit in the stitch pattern repeats. And so as you can see here a little bit, there are some stripes going on that don't quite feel like they are in the stitch pattern, and that's because we will place 8 more markers. That's 2 on each side of the sleeve and body separating markers. And those extra markers will be locking markers that will denote where we can actually start to follow the chart to make sure we can fit full repeats. And that is a locking marker because as we increase more stitches, we will eventually reach a point where there will be enough stitches to fit another repeat. So that's when we move the marker and we can fit a new repeat in. And the biggest complexity is that the length of each of the yoke shaping sections, so the A, B, C, D, do not coincide with how the charts change. For size 1 and 2 and 3, for example, the section A is around 26 rounds, but for the larger sizes, it's just 18 rounds because the larger sizes need to start the armhole shaping a little sooner. However, the chart section of the thorn stitch, that is pretty much very similar across all the sizes, and it will be determined by the number of rows that are in the chart, and also to make it symmetric, look symmetric across the whole yoke. And which is why you need to keep track of 2 separate things: which yoke shaping section we're on and which chart we're following. And that's why I've added that tracker table at the end of the pattern to help you keep track. And probably the funniest one that is like as if this wasn't enough complicated is that the thorn stitch pattern actually has a changing stitch count. So it starts, it takes up space of 4 stitches, but to make these little textured bits here, in some rows, those 4 stitches become 6 stitches, and then a few rows later, they go back to 4 stitches, etc. So that's why in the pattern, you'll see that the pattern repeat in the chart is actually 6 stitches wide, but the pattern assumes that it's just 4 stitches, which is why you can only count the stitches, the total stitches, after a certain number of rows when each pattern repeat is back to its initial 4 rows again. That's to keep the instructions on a simple side. So either you count the pattern repeats that fit, or you just assume that each pattern repeat is only 4 stitches all the time. And because of this changing stitch count, the chart has actually 3 types of pattern repeats. There's the bordering pattern repeat, then there's the repeat that you need to repeat throughout until the last pattern repeat, which is again slightly different, and that's to make sure that we don't add or lose stitches as we work through the chart. And I guess the one bit of really good news is that even though this looks like we're working with 2 yarns, we're only ever working with 1 yarn at a time. So when we're working with the sheer yarn, we're leaving the opaque one hanging at the beginning of round, and then we'll work a couple of rounds with the opaque yarn and then a couple of rounds with the sheer yarn. So we never actually work with 2 yarns at the same time. And you can see that there will be little floats, little vertical floats running across the inside, across the where the beginning of round is. And after all that dreadful shaping in the yoke is done, we'll get to a point where we separate the sleeves. So we'll work across the body stitches, put the sleeve stitches on hold, and cast on some underarm stitches here to join the back, and we'll do the same at the other side. And again, because we don't want the pattern repeat width to dictate how wide our sweater can be, there's not going to be enough stitches to fit a complete repeat. So you will again have those locking markers here on the sides, on each side of the side marker, to denote where it's out of frame. Yeah, so here you can clearly see that the charted area started a little bit off the side here because I didn't have enough stitches to fit the full repeat. And as a result of that, the sides appear a little striped instead of being in the pattern. I am personally not really bothered about that because it's on the side and it's not that visible, and it meant it keeps the pattern simpler to grade and write up. If you are welcome to play with the stitch count here so that you could just have an uninterrupted sort of pattern without any breaks at the sides. I like the break at the sides because that helps me block the sweater later. I know exactly where the side is. But if you're not worried about that and you'd rather have the thorn stitch throughout, by all means reduce some stitches or add some stitches to get a multiple of 4 when you start the chart. And as I mentioned before, you can decide how long to make each of these sections. That is entirely up to you. I think I started with repeating the chart twice. The second time I repeated it 3 times. The third time I repeated it 4 times, etc. And then when I was happy with the length, I just cut it wherever it fell. But you can come up with your own sequence. You could make the whole thing in this thorn stitch. It does take a little while longer to knit than, of course, the plain stockinette parts, but it's entirely up to you. And we finish with a rib, a 1x1 rib, but the texture part comes from doing some of the rounds here with the sheer yarn, so it's broken up and looking a little bit more bumpier and textured. That's also, of course, optional. You can stick to a very classic 1x1 rib, and I'm using the tubular bind off here for a nice and polished finish. And the same with the sleeves. Once we're done with the body, we pick up the sleeve stitches here at the underarm and join them with the stitches that were put on hold and work the same sequence of the chart stitch patterns down in the round to your desired length. And of course we have decreases for the sleeves, so the same kind of charted area marker situation will be going, but in this case we'll have to follow closely how many stitches we have until the chart marker and move it accordingly. This time it will be inward because we are decreasing stitches, so we'll be running out of stitches for the full chart repeats. And the last but not least, in fact, you could probably add this as soon as you have joined the yoke in the round. I like to wait at least until I have split at the underarm to see how it will sit. But we pick up stitches around the neckline, so 1 stitch for each stitch cast on, 1 stitch for each of the rows here along the shoulder edges, and 1 stitch for each of the cast on at the front, and we join it in the round. And then on the next round we do a little bit of decreasing along here where we picked up vertically to adjust for the row and stitch gauge difference, and then we just do exactly the same rib that we did for hem and cuffs. So yeah, possible modifications. As I said, because we're working top down, you can adjust the length both of the body and the sleeves to your desire. I saw at least one short sleeve version, so you could make it a summer t-shirt if you wanted to. And the same, of course, for the body. You could make it cropped, very long, or super long, however much yarn you have. Of course, if you make it a different length than in the schematic, then your yardage will be, of course, affected, and you would need less or more. And the same goes with if you go wildly off the same style that the sample was made, then your yardage will also be affected. Let's say if you make it predominantly stockinette, which you could do, you could just make the whole thing in stockinette, ignore the charts, just knit everything. and you would still have a comfortable oversized drop shoulder crew neck with a European shoulder in DK weight yarn. But where's the fun in that? You could also make it all of it in thorn stitch. It would take you a little bit longer, but of course it would also use a lot more of the sheer yarn than is stated in the yardage requirements in the pattern. So just be mindful of that. So take the yardage as a guide, and be mindful of what the modifications you want to make to it and how that might affect your yardage. Yeah, so I did mention this, that after you've split for the sleeves, you can rearrange the charts and how long each stitch pattern is. That is also a very powerful way to truly customize the sweater to suit your needs. I used very contrasting color combination, and I am loving how this looks. I think the little variegation in the sheer yarn is probably one of the most successful uses of variegated yarn because of the stitch pattern. You can see that if there is a lot of one color, it's kind of concentrated in that one triangle because of the way the stitch pattern is. I would recommend trying variegated yarn because you will be surprised and intrigued and see where when I was knitting it, I was always looking forward to the next golden sparkle, which actually inspired the name of the sweater, because Thuraya is something to do with the stars, and I saw little stars in my project popping up here and there. Another modification is the ribbing in the hem and cuffs and neckband. I made it stripy, but you don't have to. There were some people felt more comfortable with removing the stripes and just doing the whole thing in opaque yarn. I would also want to see somebody dare to do this as a turtleneck. I think it would look like a really cozy, cool sweater without the stripes, probably to go with the framing of the shoulders. So there it is. If you are intrigued by this project, go ahead and download the pattern. Links are in the description. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my newsletter where I announce all of the new pattern releases with additional exclusive discounts to subscribers. And I hope this video was useful and helpful, and I see you in the next one.